Ever since he was incarnated into the physical world, Griffith has cemented himself as a Christ-like figure in the eyes of the people of Berserk thanks to the miracles he now performs on the regular. Want to shoot multiple volleys of arrows in his direction? They'll all miss him, even at point-blank range. Enemy leader in an impregnable position surrounded by allies? Griffith's majestic steed literally glides over all obstacles, allowing him to stab his target right in the head. He used to be a beautiful man with an undeniable presence, even as a human, but now, merely being in Griffith's presence was enough for you to instinctively revere him as a godlike figure. He can subdue apostles with a thought, ride the branches of the world spiral tree with ease. Basically, what we're trying to say is Griffith now has a lot of cool new powers that have helped him solidify his position as the Falcon of Light. But perhaps his most impressive feat of divinity is also one that doubles as his darkest. Griffith can talk to the souls of the dead and give them peace in life before they move on from the physical world. Well, on the surface, this sounds like the ultimate closure that a person of faith can get. When you take a closer look at what he's actually doing, it sends a chill down the spine. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it and investigate this Berserk mystery. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. He's like a soul whisperer hell-bent on giving people what they want. Griffith's ability to commune with the dead debuts after the battle at Lumius. Upon his incarnation into the physical world thanks to the incarnation ceremony, Griffith wastes no time in going to work on realizing his dream. He takes a short detour to Godot's home in the mountains for a reunion with Guts and Rickert upon the Hill of Swords, and after confirming that he feels zero guilt or responsibility for his actions at the eclipse, Griffith departs the scene with Zod and gets to work. His first act is to save the besieged city of Shet from the Kushan invaders that were violating the land and its people. Griffith simply canters onto the battlefield with his nameless steed and immediately kills the Kushan general in charge of the siege before accepting oaths of fealty from the dozens of apostles who show up to serve under him. He displays many of the powers we listed in our introduction here, dodging arrows without even moving, instinctively establishing a master-servant relationship with the apostles who came to his call, and mesmerizing everyone else with his mere presence and magnetic aura. Griffith is able to quickly achieve victory at Shet thanks to his new soldiers like Locus, Grunbeld, and Rakshas, who can each take down a battalion by themselves if the need arises. He then moves on to liberate the city of Lumius, and this is where one of Berserk's purest characters gets introduced to the story. Mule Wolfflame is a teenaged lord who has lost his father and brothers to the Kushan invading his small fiefdom of Lumius. Mule's family is so far down the pecking order that they're not even allowed to enter the royal castle, and his city has been captured by the Kushan anyway, yet he intends to stand and fight, not for honor or glory, but for the safety of his subjects. Even after hearing of the liberation campaign of the reborn Band of the Falcon and the return of Count Griffith, the savior of Midland, Mule chooses not to listen to his soldiers' advice to exercise caution, instead opting to order a charge in defense of his defenseless subjects. It's an honorable move that can only be performed by someone with his youthful ideals. Had Mule been a little older, he might have listened to his man and abandoned his subjects in favor of a more practical solution, but Mule's protective instinct towards his people sets him apart from most other nobles we've seen in the story, and maybe this is why the Christ of Berserk showed up to save his hide in the nick of time. Griffith and his Band of the Falcon easily decimate the Kushan forces occupying Lumius, and take all the liberated people along with them on the road. The young lordling is first astonished by how peaceful Griffith's war camp is, then annoyed at the fact that they're using Kushan captives as war slaves in all but name, and then terrified of the very war demons that saved him and his people. Mule is put through the emotional gauntlet as he tries to wrap his head around why a Midlander would adopt Kushan tactics, why the people following him seem to have forgotten the misery they were rescued from, and why in the world were legendary knights like Grunbeld and Locus in his service. He can instinctively sense that the war demons are something other than human, but he can't quite place it yet. All in all, he was more skeptical of this reborn Band of the Falcon than thankful for it, but that all changed in an instant when he met Griffith. The mere sight and voice of the Falcon of Light were enough to let Mule know that serving him was his destiny, but that isn't why we're telling you all this. This was also the place where we first saw Griffith commune with the souls of the dead, and we think Mule's POV was a great way to introduce it as well because of his complete faith in duty and morality. Though Mule had only been in the story for a couple of chapters, chapters before he met Griffith, he managed to establish himself as one of the very few people in Berserk who had earned the status of a noble. He might be young, but he isn't afraid to put his own life on the line for his subjects, and he views his duty as a responsibility, and not just a privilege. Mule is what most people think nobility should be like: upstanding, brave, and above all, moralistic. So it's important to note that the first question Mule asks Griffith after witnessing his little soul whisperer performance is where exactly did those souls end up going to? Mule is a good boy, as we've already established, says his prayers before time. He's read his scripture, and he probably also says his prayers before bedtime, just to be on the safe side. The moment he noticed Griffith communing with the cluster of lights that apparently represented the souls of those who died in Griffith's service, his guard went all the way up, because to Mule, he was essentially witnessing a divine act. No human should have the power to even manifest the souls of the dead, let alone attract them like moths to a flame and actually be able to speak to them. Griffith had done not just that, but he also guided each departing soul to its respective loved ones so they can say their final goodbyes and be at peace. All of this was too much for Mule to take in without questioning any of it, and so he raises the most pertinent question once Griffith's light show is over. The answer doesn't leave him satisfied, and he doesn't get the time to process it, because as soon as he hears Griffith's voice, Mule is entranced by it. He offers up his sword to the Falcon of Light despite acknowledging that Griffith was a total stranger to him, and is confused by the overwhelming sense of devotion and destiny that wells up within him from out of nowhere. But once he knelt and was accepted by Griffith, his skepticism came to an end. After joining the Band of the Falcon, Mule is assigned to become Sonia's personal shield, and he spends his days chasing after her and carrying out the bidding of his messianic leader. He helps bring the Pontiff over to Griffith's side, forms a rivalry with Isidro at Vertanis, and is just generally one of those shonens you can root for despite knowing he fights for the wrong side. But it is Mule's skepticism that holds the key to understanding just what kind of a game Griffith was playing with those souls lost in his service. They go to a place where they become one. How Griffith is sending deceased souls to the abyss, and why no one is talking about it. Before we start explaining what happens to the souls that Griffith communes with, let's go back to the conversation he has with Mule upon their first encounter. When Mule asks Griffith exactly where the souls of the deceased end up after his communion with them, Griffith states that they go to a place where they become one. Mule follows it up by asking whether that place is heaven or hell, but before he can get the latter thought out of his mouth, Griffith cuts him off by telling him he will know one day, because that time comes for everyone. He then thanks Mule for providing his band with the provisions they needed to keep fighting the war, and then Mule becomes Griffith's man, as we told you in the previous section. The fact that Griffith cuts him off before he can actually say the word hell is interesting, because even as a human, Griffith didn't really make much of a difference between heaven or hell. This was especially evident in his reaction to his and Guts' fight with Nosferatu Zod, which Griffith simply took as proof of a higher existence without getting into the nitty-gritty of whether Zod himself was serving God or the devil. He's always had this moral ambiguity about him, but it becomes even more intense following his incarnation because Miura decided to stop showing us Griffith's thoughts following the eclipse. While Griffith speaks on multiple occasions post-incarnation, his actual reasoning is conveniently left out, as the characters around him marvel at his divine existence. Miura made this intentional choice to let the reader decide where they fell on the Griffith did nothing wrong spectrum. He has never explicitly tried to make Griffith out to be the hero of this story, since he returned in a body of flesh. He's merely tried to make Griffith appear like the protagonist of his own story within Berserk's overarching tale. The real Griffith only shows himself momentarily in amongst all the pageantry of the reborn Band of the Falcon, and it's only for a fleeting moment. One of these moments took place during his first encounter with Mule, and that's kind of how we see that Griffith is sending all those pure souls that died in his service straight to hell. If you read chapter 195 carefully, you'll notice that in the panel where Griffith is sending a dead soul presumably to heaven, he himself is smiling a sly smile that says he knows better. It's only in that one panel, as his face reverts to its usual stoic exterior once he concludes the ceremony, but that much is enough to indicate that yes, something is in fact very wrong about this whole soul whisperer business. It's suspicious, to say the least, that Griffith, a man who sacrificed his lifelong comrades in exchange for power, is now suddenly interested in giving people a peaceful afterlife. If anything, all the people who died in his service during his first life probably ended up in hell, especially those he sacrificed, and we think that's exactly where all the people dying in his service in his second life are going to as well. In chapter 335, Rickert witnesses the same ceremony Mule had, but on a much grander stage. Having portrayed himself as the savior of humanity, the Falcon of Light, Griffith was now the centerpiece of the faith of the Holy See. He would conduct mass funerals presided over by the pontiff himself, and take Sonia's help in guiding the spirits to their appropriate friends and family before they departed the physical world. Rickard is at a loss for words, but he gets an explanation for what he's witnessing from an unlikely source, the Moonlight Knight, Locus. Locus explains to Rickard what we, as readers of Berserk, already know, that the body is not the end of life itself. The soul of a human exists beyond their mortal lives, and what Rickard and the rest of Falconia witnessed every time Griffith communed with the deceased spirits was that truth about life. He then pivots to briefly touch upon the concept of the divine right of kings. In essence, this concept espouses that a king's moral authority is derived from his divine station, in that they are placed upon their thrones by the hand of God, and derive legitimacy for their claims from religious orders like the Holy See. The concept of the divine right of kings is one that has been practiced by many rulers over the centuries, but nowhere does it apply more perfectly than in the case of Griffith. Locus then goes on to show Rickard the domed home of the apostles within Falconia, Pandemonium, and claims that Griffith has created an inclusive utopia within his capital city. Humans no longer need to fight each other. They need only wield the sword to protect other humans from the spiritual creatures now overrunning all of planet Berserk. Apostles, who are natural enemies to mankind, now have a place in the world as protectors of mankind thanks to Griffith. Humans who thought death to be the end of life no longer think that way because Griffith showed them the truth about life and granted those who died in his service the extraordinary privilege of having one final conversation with their loved ones before they passed on to the spirit world. On the surface, everything he says makes Falconia feel like the utopia Locus claims it is, but his description of Pandemonium itself betrays that notion. Locus tells Rickard that on the surface, the official purpose for Pandemonium's existence was combat training, but in reality, his apostle brethren were simply brutes who craved violence and bloodshed, the implication being that Griffith was smart enough to bring ogres and other monsters into Falconia under the pretext of training to keep his apostles in check. Otherwise, they'd have likely consumed many of his citizens and caused unparalleled carnage on the streets of Falconia. Sure, humans no longer had to fight each other, but that was only because Griffith broke the seals that held back the world spile tree from leaching into the physical world. He was basically solving a problem no one knew he created in the first place. And as for granting peace to the souls of the deceased, it is true that Griffith's communions give those that live under his rule the peace of mind that their loved ones had gone to another place, but according to our deductions, that place happened to be the Abyss, which is Berserk's version of hell. So really, what Griffith is giving the Falconians that look up to him as a messiah is a false sense of spiritual security. And how do we know that Griffith is sending them to the Abyss? Well, that's simple. It's because he's a god hand. Recall how, in his description of the divine right of kings to Rickard, Locus brings up the idea that a ruler with that right would be placed upon his throne by the hand of God. Ever since he became a god hand member, all of Griffith's actions have been in service of achieving this ideal of a king appointed by Providence, because, well, the god hand itself is supposed to be the hand of God that Locus talks about. Griffith, as its index finger, thus becomes an extension of God himself, and if Miura hadn't removed the idea of evil from the volumized continuity, then you would be able to put two and two together and realize that the souls dying in Griffith's service were becoming one by joining the endless swirling mass of tormented souls that was the Abyss. We learned way back in the Black Swordsman arc that the Abyss, or Berserk's version of Hell, was nothing more than a collection of the consciousness of those who got tangled up with demonkind or lived morally incorrect lives their entire existence. Then, in chapter 82, we saw Griffith's astral self sink into the Abyss after he confirmed his sacrifice of the Band of the Falcon. When he reached the bottom of that endless pit, he was met by a monstrous lump of flesh shaped like a heart and covered with eyes, which he addressed as God. Chapter 83 explains how the Abyss and its presiding god, the idea of evil, came into existence as an extension of the dark side of humanity's collective consciousness, and how the God Hand, as the idea's chosen ones, were basically extensions of its will. The God Hand itself is supposed to represent the right hand of God, as every image of these ethereal beings' appearance, save for their first, has a massive right hand lurking in the background. Griffith, or Femto, is always placed at the index finger of this hand of God, and without diving too deep into palmistry, we'll just tell you that that finger is usually associated with authority, ambition, and leadership. Three qualities that ooze out of Griffith's very being since before his reincarnation. But the more interesting interpretation of his placement comes from Islam, where the index finger signifies the concept of Tawhid, which denotes the indivisible oneness of God. In Islam, God is the one and only absolute being in this universe, and his existence is signified in humanity through the index finger, arguably the most important digit on any person's hand. And what was it that Griffith said happened to the souls he communed with after he was done? That's right, he said that they go to a place where they become one. Having laid out all these complicated analogies and developments in front of you, we think that you understand now why we said the truth behind these communions would send a chill down your spine. Just imagine how the Falconians, who think their loved ones are going to a better place after death, will react when they realize that the place is actually hell. He has committed numerous atrocities that would rend a human soul apart during his time in Berserk, but letting people think their relatives and lovers are going to heaven when he's sending them to hell has to be the most diabolical thing Griffith has ever done, and that's exactly what makes him such an effective villain. Marvelous verdict. But as far as this video is concerned, that's gonna have to be it. Griffith's power over his people lasts only as long as the illusion that he's saving them does. Once that illusion is shattered, we think Falconians will end up turning on their beloved savior, because they will realize that he's the one who made their lives a living hell in the first place. And not only that, but he's also sending them to hell as well, under the pretext of giving their souls eternal rest. Griffith's communions ever since becoming the Falcon of Light are one of the most despicable things he's thought of doing since Casca back during the eclipse, and that's saying something. But what do you guys think? Where are these souls going to, in your opinion? Let us know in the comments section down below, and we'll see you guys in the next one. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.